Good morning, Josh. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Really appreciate this opportunity to get to talk to you right here in my backyard, in my little orchard. And feeling great.
Nice, man. It's like such an honor for me to just sit here and chat with you. I was telling you before we started recording, we just don't get to sit around with each other and talk and have these like conversations other than Shabbat. And with Corona and everything else and all the things that are going on in our lives, family and friends, it ends up being a lot. So it's really exciting for me to like sit down with you and chat.
It's exciting for me too. And you're right. It's these are very interesting times we're going through, and one of the effects of it is definitely the social disparity between our normal lives and what's going on now. So this is a great opportunity to sit down and talk. And here's a prayer, a little prayer out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to get us past this time real quick, so that we can all get together and hang together and socialize together and get to talk to each other. But I appreciate this opportunity.
Amen. Josh, I'm going to do a little intro here. Okay, don't blush. Josh, you're a true lover of Israel and all Jews. That's one thing that I noticed about you in all 8 years that I've known you. And you're a builder, but you're not just a physical builder. You're a builder of community. You're a builder of friendships. You're a builder of ahava, of love between one Jew to another. One thing that always sticks with me was when Ari Fold was murdered, you started this campaign with the flags. And it was just like a simple gesture. There was a lot going on at that time. And this is just like, it was just a simple gesture, a symbol that everybody can just put out and show each other we're all feeling the same hurt. We're all in the same situation here. And obviously, we commiserate and we're all there for each other. Do you remember that time at all? Do you remember doing that? Like, what were some of the things that were going on in your head at that time?
Yeah, it's a time you can't forget. A very sad time, a very unfortunate time for us as individuals, as Jews, for Efrat as a community, and for Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael, Bichlal, to lose a person like Ari Fold. Ari and I, we go back a bunch of years just to activism, Jewish activism, and we were together on the Kita Konanut of Efrat for years until I retired for old age. And it's like the frustration that goes beyond the sadness and the tragedy. It's the frustration of what can I do? Like, to honor Ari, Hashem Yimkom Damo.
In those situations, we're like, what can we do?
And there's not much you can do. So to think of something simple that every member of Am Yisrael everywhere, in Israel, in Efrat, in Chutz La'aretz, can take part in is just raising a flag in honor of Ari Fold. And that's what we did. We got the campaign moving quickly. We put it out there. Debbie Dvorak very much helped with getting funding. She was a key part of the whole thing. And
those flags were out there for a long time. There's still some of them out now.
A lot of them are still out. Yeah, it caught on, and it also spread to outside of Efrat. We had people giving out flags to people at Somet Hagush and at the shopping center, and then we started seeing videos of people doing this all over Israel. And it was just a solidarity thing and a way to show your connection and your appreciation for people like Ari Fold, who gave their life for Eretz Yisrael, and Am Yisrael.
Right. Yeah, that was special. You're also a huge Grateful Dead fan, a fan of music in general. I feel like that's something that we have a good bond on. You're a ponderer. I walk around town. I drive around town. I see you walking around town, just in your own thoughts, collecting your thoughts, and I don't really know what's going on in there, but seeing that is kind of honestly just calming. Seeing you walk around and, you're out there just kind of looking at the hills behind, the ones that are in front of us. And out here, can you just explain this situation where we are right now and what this place is about. This is like, you can't see the whole picture here, but there's this beautiful path here that's lined with these trees, and behind us there is a vineyard and an orchard of a bunch of different types of trees, right?
Yeah.
And you guys, you planted this. Is that correct?
Not me myself, but when I moved to the Zayit, we moved to Efrat in 1988.
Yeah.
And we moved to the Zayit in the summer of the year 2000. And the first thing that we found out is that this entire section of land was not part of Efrat's land. It was outside the boundaries of Efrat because there was some kind of suspicion or thought or whatever that this land may be privately owned by Arabs. So they didn't incorporate it into the map of Efrat.
I mean, there's houses up there, there's houses up there, there's houses over there. So
it's like an
that's
enclave.
interesting.
It's an enclave, and there's actually several of them in Efrat behind the Geffen,
Right.
And in the Dekel next to the school. There's a lot of enclaves like that. And the policy that the founders of Efrat had, Rabbi Riskin mainly, was we wanted to live in, I don't know if I use the word peace, but in cooperation and coexistence with our neighbors.
Right.
And therefore they didn't want to have a situation where they took any land that maybe was privately owned by them, and that created these enclaves.
Right.
And this particular one had no sign of it ever having had any agricultural land on it or anything. And I decided that in order to prevent a future claim of an Arab to come and claim this enclave, we would create facts on the ground. And together with other people in the community back then, we're talking 20 years ago.
Right.
And together with our friend Artie Englard, who doesn't live in Efrat anymore.
This is, were there any houses built in
Well,
the site?
the very first trees that we planted here were in 2000 or 2001.
Right.
When we moved into this neighborhood,
Yeah.
there were only 8 families. There were 8 houses. There were no roads. There was no electricity, no street lighting, of course. We all were connected to this generator, which would break down constantly.
Right.
And that would be our social meeting point, because when the generator broke down and the 8 houses,
out of their house.
everyone came out to try to crank up that generator again. And
our first world problem of that now is when the internet goes down, right? We'll go, we'll all step out of our house and say, hey, we don't have Klita right now.
Right.
But this is no electricity. That's definitely different.
You could say it was pioneering, but we were just like a hop, skip, and a jump and away from everything we needed.
Sure.
But it was an interesting time, and actually the Intifada broke out that September, like shortly after we moved in here. So the generator going down and the place being totally black and nothing, and at the same time all the shooting that was going on in Beit Lechem and helicopters and this and that. It was pretty crazy times. And
your mic up just a little bit.
And it was during that period that we also started working on this, and it was an ongoing thing. And the original idea, like I said, was just to create facts on the ground. We kept expanding it over the years and adding fruit trees. We've got olives and figs and pomegranates and lots of almond trees. And there's a couple of, probably a few dozen grape vines growing. And it's just really great. And what it developed into over the years is a place for people to just come and breathe some air.
Yeah.
Get their thoughts together, contemplate.
Take my kids here.
Sit down, enjoy. Work the land a little bit. I encourage the kids in the neighborhood to come and help out, and they do. And it's just a wonderful little spot, and it's where I pray usually, even before Corona.
Sure.
Okay. So
I've come here to pray too. I've done my hitbodedut here. I've just come here and been silent.
Yeah. That's and I get a lot of pleasure from that.
Yeah.
When I see people up here, anyone just coming up here and even just sitting and breathing and thinking, praying, it brings me a lot of pleasure.
I'm gonna move on and continue with the little intro. You're a dad, a husband, a granddad. How many grandchildren do you have?
Well, I have a baseball team now. We just made a Brit for my 9th grandchild.
Wow, Mazal Tov.
The Brit was actually 2 days ago, right in my
Beautiful.
house.
Beautiful.
Because of Corona times, it was a very small event. We had just immediate family, but it was wonderful, and just on so many levels. Another Jewish child in Eretz Yisrael, in Am Yisrael, and my own little daughter, who just such a short time ago, was I was like holding her and as a little baby, and then now she has her own baby, and
Right.
It's just wonderful.
It's like you came here in '88. You said.
Yeah. No, I came to Efrat in '88. I came to Israel in 1976.
Oh wow. Oh
Yeah.
wow. My uncle came here that year as well. Incredible. That was a whole different world back
Sure
then.
was. Yeah.
World changes quickly though, and often. Wow. So '88, you come to Efrat in 2000 and.
Come to Efrat in 1988.
Oh right, you came to Efrat to Zayed.
We came
in
to the
2000.
Zayed in the year 2000. Right. We were basically, us and 7 other families were the first families to come to this side of Efrat, this whole neighborhood
Beautiful.
here. The neighborhood really wasn't built yet.
Right.
It was,
I mean,
like
now
said,
there's hundreds of families here.
Yeah,
It's wonderful.
fantastic. And we got to this neighborhood not in a natural way. I mean, Am Yisrael got to this neighborhood not in a natural way. The same way Givat Dagan and Givat Tamar also were settled. People tend to think of Efrat as like this kind of bourgeois place, not a place of activism and all that. And the truth of the matter is, Efrat produced many, many activists, settlement activists, and there are still many people that are actively involved in securing the safety and future of Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael, Nadia Matar, and other leaders.
I call them like the rock stars of the Jewish nation. I mean, there's so many
really
more
are.
too. I mean, Yishai Fleischer moved here.
Yeah, we've got loads of
Caroline
Glick
lives here. Like it's
lots
incredible.
of good people, solid people, and what happened was with Givat Hazayit is the Oslo process was going on in the 90s, and actually, Efrat had gotten permission to stop building on Givat Tamar.
Mm-hmm.
And when the tractors went up there, the Arabs came and demonstrated. It got very nasty, it got violent. And Rabin was prime minister, and he got cold feet, and he wanted to stop the construction, even though the government had approved it.
Right.
And there were demonstrations, and there were Moatzah meetings, what to do, and whether we should fight to keep building on the Tamar. And in the final analysis, our Moatzah back then decided that against a promise from the government that they would let us stop building immediately on Givat Hazayit instead of Givat Tamar for the time being, that they would back off and not protest. And there were a lot of people in Efrat that were against that decision, but we won't get into the politics of it. But the promise was made by the government to settle the Zayed.
Right.
And then the government reneged on their promise.
Okay.
So the original settlement of Givat Hazayit, something that a lot of people don't know, was a middle-of-the-night clandestine activity that was organized. The Moatzah was involved as well, and Gush Emunim, or Amanah, and the activists of Efrat, what we called back then the Vad Pula, the Action Committee. And basically, a few caravans were liberated, I'll use that word, from Givat HaMivtar, all the way on across the road on the other side of Efrat, and were brought to the Zayed in the middle of the night. And there were some confrontations with the police and the army that tried to stop it, but we did manage to get one caravan up to around where the school is today.
Oh, okay.
And that was it. Once we had that one caravan, it was facts on the ground.
Right. And
everything went from there.
Wow.
And then, of course, eventually they did permit the construction here. And as soon as that happened, the Vad Pula, the Action Committee, shifted our focus to Givat Dagan.
Right.
That was in 1995. And we went up to 95 because it was just before Oslo was going to be signed the stages, and basically the word that we were getting from within the government, from people that were reliable sources, was that any hills that aren't actually settled that there's no physical presence, we're in danger of being given over to the Arabs
Right.
in the final map of the Oslo
Right.
Agreement.
And I mean, there was like a map of Efrat drawn out from the very beginning,
Oh, most certainly.
which included all these gvot.
The Givata Dagan,
Right.
Givata Tamar, the Etam was part of Efrat.
Oh,
It is
yeah.
in the, but there was a very serious chance that we were going to lose those hills. So as we had already created facts on the ground in the Zayat, we shifted the focus. And when I say we, it wasn't as much me as it was my wife Marilyn, Eve Harrow, who
Yeah.
also lives in this neighborhood,
Yeah.
and Nadia Matar,
Another rock star.
and
Yeah.
Sharon Katz. It was the four women who
Oh,
really
all rock
organized
stars.
the whole Dagan
Yeah.
thing and got the activists behind them. And we went up to the Dagan and we created facts on the ground there as well.
Right.
It was the summer of 1995, and we see what the Dagan is today.
Wow.
And the Tamar,
Yeah.
same story,
Mhm.
in 2001,
Yeah.
in reaction to the murder of two Jews from Efrat
Hmm.
in terror attacks that took place right on the road, right here on
Yeah.
the main road. We, again, in a clandestine activity very early in the morning, grabbed a couple of caravans from Givata Dagan,
Yeah.
which at that point already had been,
Hmm.
we were already there.
Was the yeshiva
And-
there then?
The yeshiva was already there,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, the yeshiva was there. There were people living there because in 1998 or 99, they really started to settle the place more massively. There was no permanent construction yet,
Right.
but they brought convoys of caravans, and they really started getting the place together.
Right.
So by 2001, when we went to the Tamar, the Dagan was already, solidly
Sure.
placed. And there were a bunch of extra old caravans that weren't being used, and we just
Brought them over.
brought them up to the Tamar, which was very complicated because it was a very steep hill. There was no road. It was a rocky road. Whatever. Make a long story short, we managed to get 3 caravans up there before the army could stop the action. And that was the creating of the facts on the ground on Givata Tamar,
Wow.
and it was continually settled from that time, from that day we went up.
I mean, isn't the Tamar like one of the largest parts, like population-wise? Or will be at least.
I think the Zayat has the most housing units
Yeah.
from all the hills in Efrat, but the Tamar has quite a bit. I mean, I think that the zoning for the Tamar in its totality, I think, is somewhere close to 500 units.
Wow.
Just for Givata Tamar itself.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's how things were
Wow.
developing here with the hills. It's just we started talking about the trees,
Sure.
but it's all like settling Eretz Yisrael, creating facts on the ground, doing things in an active way, sometimes breaking the law, but never, God forbid, with violence or
Right.
anything. And that's it. That's where we
That's
are.
beautiful. I was getting into a question. You come to Efrat in '88, and you have children who grow up here, and now you have grandchildren growing up here. You planted these seeds. I'm still relatively a new Ole. I'm only here 8 years, and my children are still young. Give me a little hindsight perspective. What are some of the emotions and feelings and thoughts that you have on that?
I'm 62 years old. I was looking back on your interview with Tom the other day,
Yeah.
and I was taken again by a comment that he made. I'm already on the other side of the mountain. You guys are still climbing up, and I'm already on the other. So I'm not on the other side of the mountain
No,
yet.
you're not.
I'm
And
around.
neither is he.
Relative to what Tom said, I'm maybe at around the top.
Okay.
I'm climbed up the hill already. I'm not over the hill. Neither is Tom. I agree with you 100%. I wish I had the energy
Right?
that Tom has.
Creativity.
Yeah, he's just unbelievable. But so as far as giving advice,
Yeah.
I don't feel like I reached the stage to really give advice in my life. But yes, there are some things. Efrat is a great place. I love Efrat. Thank God some of my kids decided after they were married to stay here and live in Efrat. You can't always keep your whole clan together in the same place, and every place they go in Eretz Yisrael is just as important and stuff, but it's nice to have some family here.
Sure.
It's very, very wonderful, and this is a big thing. it's very wonderful and completely different
We're good.
than what happened in my, coming up in the world as a human being.
Right.
Is that my kids grew up with kids their whole life in the same place, and now they're married, and they're having kids, and their kids are friends.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like our friends, and my children and our friends' children grew up together, had children, and now have their own children who are also in the same group of friends.
Wow.
So it's like 3 generations of friends,
Wow.
not relatives, friends. Something that I never had, and that's something that a place like Efrat has to offer, and it's a wonderful thing. But what can I tell you? Like, what was your question?
No, you've pretty much answered it. It was kind of like, what are your thoughts and your emotions, your feelings about that, having the 3 generations?
It's just a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing, and despite there's always, every place has its stuff going on in the
Sure.
background and its problems and its background politics and stuff. But Efrat is a wonderful place, and it's a wonderful place to raise your kids and to educate them. And you should look forward as a father to doing that. And you're in a great chevra of people. You shifted from the Zayed to the Dagan, and you've got a great chevra in both places.
Yeah.
And just enjoy every second of it.
Yeah.
Pull it all in. Let your kids enjoy every second of it. Keep them close.
Beautiful. Like this segues right into the next description I had of you. You're like the unofficial, like, mayor of the people. You're always standing guard and showing us what it means to live here, and it's very meaningful. Thank you for that. You're really an inspiration. You're a leader. You lead by example, especially for us new Olim. And I still call myself a new Ole, even though I'm here 8 years. Still figuring my way out, figuring out language, figuring out my laying deep roots here. You're also the official singer of Four Winds Home Rehearsals. You're the official lead singer of Four Winds Home Rehearsals. That was wonderful.
I don't think they would agree with that comment. That was like a one-time little thing.
That was great.
Midnight Hour or Love Light, whatever it was we were singing that night. Both of them happened to be 2 very loved tunes that I love very much. So that opportunity to just sing that song was great. Yeah.
For those that don't know, Four Winds Home is a Grateful Dead tribute band, cover band, however you want to call it, locally. Some local guys and gals, wonderful people.
Great band too. Love them.
Absolutely. And you're an OG. You're an original. You're an original Efrat. You're an original Efratian. So, I mean, I just want to say another thing about the generational thing. I know 2 of your children. Michaela is a Mora Mitakenet for my 2 boys, and she's wonderful. I don't know if I've told you this before. She's great. She comes every week. With Corona, it's been spotty, but she started coming back, thank God, now that the Seger things have opened up a little bit. And she's an incredible teacher. One thing she told me that kind of relates to what we were saying before is, she said, I grew up the way your children are growing up. My parents were the Olim. And I had to learn in these 2, coming from an American background, speaking English, and being a true Sabra, like an Israeli. So she really has a very good perspective, and she's really good at teaching the children coming from that place. And it's something that's really been helpful to them, because you can get a tutor who's just a local who is, a few generations in, or you can get an American tutor, but to have this mix, this unique perspective,
that
is
has
really
that experience that went through the experience that your kids are going through. Right.
We're similar
Right.
experiences. What they're going through is just incredible. So
And who else do you know?
What's that?
Who else do you know?
And Aaron, I live
right.
in the.
Okay,
Pull your mic up a little bit. With Aaron, he's my neighbor. He's really a tzaddik, a wonderful person who's similar to his Abba, who goes out there saving people every day. It's incredible. I see him out there. I see him in the truck. I see him in the van. He's going out to pretty much, I don't know. How often does he go on calls? It's all day long.
He has a big schut, Aaron.
Bring it up a little bit, yeah.
Aaron has a big schut that Hashem gave him to be able to save people's lives, which he's done countless times. He's a paramedic with Mada for a long time. He was a paramedic in Sahel, in an elite unit, and now he's in medical school together with his wife.
Wow.
They're both in medical school. They're in their 4th year now, and he was given a big zchut. And how often does he go out? He has his official shifts that he does, which aren't that many because he's got a heavy study load and he's got 4 children.
Right.
But his walkie-talkie and his beepers and stuff are on 24 hours a day, and any call that's local, whether he's on duty or off, he will respond to. Some of the people in Efrat whose lives he's saved and stuff know that. But yeah, it's a big zchut for me too.
Yeah.
He's like, sometimes I say Aaron is the apple that fell far from the tree. Baruch Hashem.
That's great.
I thank Hashem and my children for that.
When you made Aliyah, where did you come from?
I
know
grew
you're
up.
East Coast.
I'm East Coast.
I feel like New York.
You got it. You're on the dot, babe.
Hold on, Brooklyn.
Yeah, you're right in there.
I
guess the accent, right? I still got that Brooklyn accent. So I grew up. I was born and raised until the age of 17 in Brooklyn, New York, which is when I made Aliyah at the age of 17, right after high school. I grew up in I wouldn't call it Haredi, but yeshivish type of environment.
Sure.
Both in terms of the neighborhoods that I lived in and the yeshivas that I learned in. And my family, my parents also, with time, moved more towards the yeshivish attitude of things. As opposed to earlier in my life, they were more Mizrahi. Mm-hmm. But as the neighborhood changed and stuff, they changed too, and that was my upbringing. I will admit that I was a big rebel, a very big rebel. Let me shut this thing off 1 second. I'm sorry. I thought I had shut it off. Where does it say shut down? Just push shut down. I don't got my glasses.
Got it. Yeah, the light's not...
There you go. I was a rebel, and I grew up at an interesting time because I was born in 1958. So, by the time I was a young teenager, the whole late 60s, early 70s thing was happening.
Sure.
And I found myself pulled between 2 worlds. And one of those worlds was not the yeshiva world that I grew up in.
Right.
The 2 worlds that I was drawn to were the hippie movement, that whole thing. It was happening around me. I was young, but I saw it, and I was influenced by it.
Sure.
And I started being pulled in that direction. And at the same time, Jewish activism had become a big thing. The Jewish Defense League, Meir Kahana Zichrono Livracha, protecting Jews in the neighborhoods, which was a big thing. There was a lot of anti-Semitism and crime against Jews locally in Brooklyn and all over. And then there was the Soviet Jewry issue, and there were neo-Nazis and all that. And I was being drawn into these 2 worlds, which of course clashed with my yeshiva world, which eventually, I had moved from yeshiva to yeshiva because no one would accept that situation. I know it might be hard to believe, but I actually learned for a year and a half in Mir.
Wow.
Yeah. But I left at mutual agreement.
I believe
it. So I have that kind of learning background and that yeshivish background. At the same time, I got very involved with Jewish activism and started getting very involved in the world of music and everything that went along with that. We don't need to go into detail right here in this interview. And eventually I put Jewish religious observance aside for many years. But I never put my Jewishness aside. And I didn't know why I put observance aside. It wasn't like a conscious decision, and I was too young and stupid to really understand things yet, but it was a natural, thing to happen as a result of my conflict with the yeshiva way of looking at things and what was happening around me and the influences that I had. And it took many, many years for me to really mature enough to start looking at things again and to slowly crawl my way back up to observance and connection to the religious aspects, if you want to say the spiritual aspects of Judaism. But not for one moment during my craziest days of Grateful Dead shows or whatever stuff that we were doing on that side. never for a moment did I forget or ignore or abandon my very strong connection to Am Yisrael. And now I'm where I am.
Right.
And,
Wonderful. So you're a builder. You've been involved in many projects here in Efrat, and I'm sure many projects outside of Efrat. I know you had something, or maybe have something in Yavni El right now. Again, a new Oleh here, kind of like a newbie. I have not bought anything yet. The situation here in Efrat right now is that there is housing, and there could always be more. And the neighborhood I just moved into last year had X amount of people in there, and this year looking for rentals was that much harder. So every year more and more people are moving to Efrat. More children of original Efratians are looking for their own houses. What are your thoughts on maybe purchasing something here in Efrat? Is it a good investment, do you think? And what kind of thing would you be looking for if you were to be purchasing right now? We'll talk about building in a minute, but purchasing a house.
Well, I'm going to approach it slightly differently. Okay, I'm going to answer you is, what would I do as far as housing if I were in charge?
Okay.
Not if I were looking to buy a house, because I'm 62 years old. I already own a house, so an apartment, a cottage, whatever. But it's very, very sad about the housing situation. Okay, and I don't even want to relate to whether Efrat is a good investment or not. Yes, of course it's a good investment. In general, real estate is a good investment. Efrat has always gone up, up, up. I look at it from a completely different angle. What about our young folks? What about you? What about the next generation of Efrat children? How could they afford to buy something these days? When I came to Efrat, my little apartment, our first apartment that we bought, if I remember correctly, it cost $82,000, which, of course, for us, it was the same as $1 million. But
Sure.
It was $82,000 between a mortgage and a little help from the family. You can pull it off. I'm talking dollars because in those days, real estate was done in dollars.
Okay.
These days, just a simple, apartment, with a few bedrooms would be 2.5 million shekels, 3 million shekels, 3.5 million shekels.
Right.
How's a young couple supposed to be able to do that? If they can get a mortgage for half the amount or 60% of the amount, where do they come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars to put a down payment?
Right.
Their parents will help them. Well, the parents can't always help them, especially if they've got 5, 6, 8 kids.
Sure.
So that is a very disturbing thing, not only for Efrat, but in Israel,
That's true.
Bichlal, that young people have a hard time achieving housing now, something that my generation didn't have such a hard time doing.
When I got married in America, I bought my first apartment. I put 5% down. There was the ability to take your savings and put it into some sort of real estate and then pay a mortgage. To have to pay 25, 35 and up % down just to get into the house and just to get that mortgage does seem like it's definitely a wall, a border. It's hard to get through that.
Very undoable.
Yeah.
I would say, probably for the majority of the young population.
Yeah.
And therefore, and I'm going to talk about Efrat. I mean, the models should be copied everywhere. But when I was a member of the Moatzah, I served as a Moatzah member for a couple of years, back in 2008 to 2010 or something like that. And I presented a plan of setting up neighborhoods for young couples.
Mm-hmm.
That would be modular housing that would allow a young couple to get an apartment at a normal price.
Mm-hmm.
It could even be light construction, something like that. Prefabricate. There are all sorts of ideas. And I said we need to.
You're not just talking trailers. You're talking like prefab stuff that gets brought in. And
or panelized construction that's
Sure.
built, but can later on you can add another floor, add another room, whatever it is, and it, you offer it as a starting out unit at a price that these young couples can
afford.
And of course, the idea was never, and I put the idea out there a lot. It was brought up at the Moatzah meetings, and I sent my plan to Moatzat Yeshan and to government ministers and stuff.
The idea is that it's like a springboard. It's your first place. Get in from there.
And as the
save up a
family
little bit
grows,
more, move
okay,
on.
there would need to be also government subsidy involved. But the idea was to have housing solutions for young couples. Unfortunately, none of those things have happened. They've had these plans that they call dira lemishtaken,
Mm-hmm.
which is ridiculous because so what? So they're taking a 2 million shekel apartment and selling it to these young couples for 1.6 million. They get a
Right.
few 100,000 shekels off.
Right.
Well, who says a young couple can afford to pay 1.6 million shekels for
Right.
an apartment? And most of them
What
can't.
about cost of building? I mean, is it just that the land is expensive, or is it also that building materials and costs, like you were saying, b'niya kala? So clearly, that would be a more affordable way to build,
Right.
at
But
least for a smaller
your
place.
question is right on the mark, and the reason for it is that the biggest part of the costs involved have now become the land and the infrastructure. It
Mhm.
used to be that the government subsidized that.
Mhm.
And that's why in Efrat, when we first came to Efrat, you could buy a migrash. The first people who came to Efrat and bought private migrashim to build their own houses,
Right.
they paid like $5,000, $10,000. When the prices really went up, it was $25,000 for
Sure.
a migrash.
Wow.
And people were like, oh, that's getting expensive already.
Right.
Well, you know what a second-hand
Oh, yeah.
migrash on Givat HaDagan
Well, how
sells
much?
for now?
Tell me.
2 million shekels
Uh-huh.
for an empty migrash
Wow.
of 350 square meters that's connected to another house.
Wow.
So it's ridiculous. Now, the reason for it is that when the land authority, the Minhal, puts this land up for sale now, these tenders or these bids that go out
Right.
are a joint bid between the Minhal and the Misrad HaShikun, the housing ministry.
Okay.
And you're basically paying for it in two parts. One is for the land and one is for the infrastructure. Well, both of those used to be...
Why are you paying for the infrastructure?
Well, what is infrastructure? Infrastructure are the roads, the
Sewer.
sidewalks, the sewage system, the
Electrical
water
lines,
and
maybe?
stuff. Yeah, that's the stuff that the government, the housing ministry provides, like in all these new neighborhoods.
Right.
And each housing unit is paying a part of that. It used to be that was all subsidized,
Right.
and therefore someone could buy a piece of land and then build a house for a reasonable amount of money. But the
Right.
subsidies have been taken away. It's become
One more
big
quick
business
question.
for the
I have a little
government.
bit of a construction background. The infrastructure itself. So when you need to develop the land, right, you have to clear the land, obviously prepare it for building, but these things, the water, the sewer, the utilities that go in, this is something that the builder needs to provide when they're building. So that's interesting because in America, it's usually only private roads, private property. I was involved in a few projects, and on the ones that are privately owned, private roads, those are the ones where you need to put in utilities infrastructure. Many other spots already are sort of part of an existing road or existing neighborhood and
Right.
items like that, and that infrastructure is provided by the town.
So the way it works here is that you don't physically the builder doesn't physically put in any infrastructure that's not within the confines of his piece of land. In other words, he doesn't put in infrastructure in the streets for the main sewage lines, but he does pay for it. He
Okay.
pays the housing ministry to do it, and it used to be completely subsidized.
Wow.
Now, not only is it not subsidized, but now it's become a business for
Right.
the housing ministry to make money off of builders.
Wow.
So people wonder why housing is so expensive. Yes, builders do make money. It's their right to make money. They don't make a hell of a lot of money
Right.
unless they're a very big company building many units. But a small builder is always in that situation where he may crash on any given project.
Right.
Because the profit margins are not as high as people think.
Right. If a few
and
things go wrong, then you're underwater
That's it.
already.
And your starting point as a builder, as a developer, as a kablan, your starting point is so high.
Yeah.
Just to get the rights to build on that piece of land, because
Right.
you're
Well,
paying
you have to bid on it.
millions. You get a bid, you got to win the bid,
Right.
and in order to win, you've got to bid high, and you're basically bidding millions of shekels to get an empty piece of land that hasn't even been excavated, and you're paying the government basically a lot of money.
Right.
They're making a lot of money off you to put the infrastructure in.
Right.
So your starting point before you've put one nail or brick into that lot is already
Right.
$500,000 or 600,000 or 700,000 shekels per housing unit.
Right.
That's before you started building. So what I'm saying is if the government went back to offering subsidies, to
Right.
subsidizing this, okay, and they should, whatever it costs the country, where our economy is solid in Israel, thank God. We need to have housing solutions for the young people. I'm sorry, I'm going on.
No, this is very interesting to me.
And I tried to set up a think tank, a group of people who are from mortgage banks and financial people and all
Right.
sorts of activists. This was several years ago. We had one meeting, and we were going to try to put a plan down on paper to present to the government and get some politicians to try to push it. But we saw right away that people were not interested. Everything is now looked at from a business point of view. There's no more
Right.
ideology. There's no more problem solving,
Right.
solution solving, creating. So it's
but
sad.
on the positive end of things, it does seem that every few years, look, I've been here for almost 10 years, tenders get released, and I feel like a lot of the issue is space, land, availability of land. So every few years, depending on the weather and the politics, more tenders get released. So at least that's a relief. I remember before Dagan was built, before Tamar was built, the Zayat real estate market was very high. I mean, incredibly high. It was incredible. I was seeing people sell houses for the amount, for these amounts where, in New York, and I know you can't compare the two because it's a very different scenario, but you'd have a ton more land and a much larger spot. But once Dagan and Tamar the building started happening, prices went down in existing neighborhoods. And now there may be an idea of dealing with existing neighborhoods. I mean, if you go back to the original neighborhoods in Efrat, right? So the Te'ena, and I don't know about the Geffen so much, but the Te'ena and that side of town, these are older houses. They've been there since the 80s, and the people who are living there are a little bit older. Some of them are moving in with their children. Some of them are moving on to other places. Mm-hmm. So to have young families, the ability for young families to come into these places, maybe renovate a little bit and spruce up some of the places, perhaps that's light at the end of the tunnel a little bit for someone like me, maybe.
It actually is happening already.
Yeah.
There is gentrification going on in the Rimona Teina. You have young families coming in and renovating. Unfortunately, the Moatza is very strict about adding another unit. Like sometimes, parents who have married children now who can't afford housing, whatever, would maybe be able to renovate and take over their parents' house in the older neighborhoods and build a little separate unit for their parents who don't need a whole big house.
Situation.
But the Moatza is very strict about that. And but yes, it is happening that there's regentrification. There are people moving in with their children wherever they may be, or going to a retirement place.
Right.
And there are young families actually purchasing now in the Teina and the Rimon, which is nice to see that.
Yeah, that is nice.
And then, of course, land reserves. Efrat has a humongous land reserve, as you know, because you're an ATOM activist, okay? And bemek kol hakavod to you and your chaver who
just
went
following
there
your lead,
doing shmirah and helping out. I mean, you didn't see me there much. I caught up on a lot of stuff.
I saw you there, but I didn't see you physically. There was a vehicle there that was in use all the time. Used to be it had a little Grateful Dead sticker on it, so I knew it was your...
That was it. That's but my partner Zev Efrat also gets the credit on that. That was our business car that we gave to the ATOM. But the ATOM has zoning for like 2,000 or 2,500 units. Mm-hmm. And again, I want to stay away from local politics, but we should have been up there already building. Right. We could have been up there already building, but let's not get into that, the politics of it. But Efrat, thank God, still does have some land reserves, and we hope we'll see some construction soon. And I pray that they take into consideration the young families and create a situation where young families will be able to buy reasonably priced housing, small units, but with a little garden or something that they can expand in the future, that has the pre-existing permit or zoning or whatever to add on. A young family with no kids or a couple of kids can exist in an 80-90 meter apartment at the beginning, and as the family grows, they can add on another room, another 2 rooms, whatever it is, and make that possibility happen. It would be wonderful, wonderful to see Efrat's next generations be able to stay in Efrat.
Look, I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic about it because people keep moving to this town, and it's growing.
It's a great town. Well, no matter how you look at it, no matter how much it costs, Efrat is a great place.
It really is. I can't believe we just landed here. We came here, and this was the first place we came to. We're really enjoying it. So I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful. I think the more people that move in, the more there's a need, the more things will open up. I'm at least hopeful for that.
I could say amen, and I believe that will happen. I also
Yeah.
would like to be optimistic.
What was like one of your favorite projects here in Efrat? I mean, we're sitting right next to like this gorgeous project that you finished about 4 years ago or so, 5 years ago.
4 years ago.
Yeah, I remember this whole area was just barren hill. I didn't even realize it was part of our town. It's kind of like on the backside of the hill.
Yeah.
What was like one of your favorite projects here in Efrat?
Not this one.
Okay.
Although I'm very happy to have been part of
This huge community.
a project that
moved in
contributed.
here. Yeah.
This project, this behind us, is 66 units altogether.
Yeah.
On an empty hill. That was an empty hill. But really, I built a lot of the houses here in the Bnei Beitcha neighborhood in Zayit.
Right.
But the interesting background of it is, you asked what's my favorite project. Really, my favorite project was Rehovat Tziporin, this street right here. And the reason for it is I built every house on the street.
Yeah.
They were all private houses.
Right.
And I used to live right there.
That's
where Dov Kram lives now.
That's right.
And the interesting story is that when we bought that lot and we built that house, this hill behind us was empty, and there was no zoning for it.
Right.
And when we bought the lot, we said, wow, well, this is going to be our view. We got the orchard right here, and we got the view. It was state land, but there was really no talk about building on it. And then they suddenly introduced new zoning, and
there's the optimistic and hopeful. Those things can come. Go on.
Yes. Now, on the one hand, we were disappointed, let's use that word, that our view was going to change and we were going to see. On the other hand, it was great that there was going to be more building in Eretz Yisrael and Efrat, etc. But there was one thing that bothered us. I mean us folks who lived here in Rehovat Tziporin, was that the zoning that they created for here were for tall buildings. And I said, I just don't want like apartment building, like these 9-10-story buildings here. I just, let's keep it low. But I had no power to change that, so the only thing that I could really do was bid on the Michraz and change it myself if I win. So I got together with a partner, and we bid, and we won the bid.
Wow. So
we redesigned, we put in a request to build lower houses from the Misrad HaShikun, the same amount of units, but instead of 3 apartment buildings, we have 7 buildings.
Okay.
And on the upper lot, instead of 4 apartment buildings, we have 36 units that are spread amongst 9 buildings. So
and these are sort of like a mix between Dumish Bhakti and apartment.
Yeah, they're like cottages with these small mishtaken
not
apartments
like
on
these
top.
towers up on the top of the hill or anything.
Right.
Okay.
So that was a success, but
Hold
unfortunately,
on, we were talking about your favorite project.
So yeah,
What's your
and so that was it. So the reason that was my favorite project is because I built every house on the street, and all the people who live there are my good and close friends, and that is a very good feeling.
Yeah,
it's not.
I always think about, you ever read The Godfather or see the movies where they had their own cul-de-sac. Where like everybody in the family kind of lived in their own cul-de-sac.
It was like that then. Our kids, like I said, there was no paving here, no nothing. The kids used to come out and play on the street all together. All our kids grew up together. I have my dog Buddy would sit here and guard them. Right. And it was our own little cul-de-sac. That's basically what it was. And when we first moved in here, we davened in my house for a little while, and then we moved to Louis Davies' house, and we davened in his house actually for maybe a couple of years till we got this little
Another hero of Efrat.
Huh?
Another hero of Efrat.
Yes, another big hero of Efrat.
Yeah.
And so that's my favorite thing, and it's one of the things that makes me feel great in life, bichlal, is that as a builder, and maybe it's not modest for me to say this, so I'll try to say it in a non-modest way, but as a builder usually doesn't want to live in the neighborhood that he built.
Right. Look, I can relate. Like, I was in construction for over 10 years. I was a project manager. I started sweeping the floors. And then eventually I was a project manager, and I even went on the other side of things, selling supplies, selling materials. I've seen a lot of aspects of it. Been involved in a lot of projects.
So you know how it is in that world,
Absolutely.
And it's not an easy world to be in. And I'm proud of the fact, and it gives me a lot of nachas, a lot of joy, that I'm friends friendly
Sure.
with the overwhelming majority of the people that I built with.
Right.
We go to each other's smachot.
Well, one thing I've
And-
heard about you and seen a few of these things is that you bring in some concepts of insulated windows, very well-made insulated windows, and that's like a very big thing here. A lot of people have issues with mold and moisture in their house because of the lack of insulation in a house. And I've seen different rentals that I've been in. If you don't have the right materials, just something like, you don't have to spend a lot of money on it, but it has to be a quality material. The technology has to be made for the area,
Absolutely.
for the climate.
But
and
more than the
that was
materials,
something that I've noticed about your building.
So we do.
Yeah.
We used modern methods and modern materials, especially when it came to insulation and stuff like that. But there's a bigger aspect of it, and that is, you got to put your love into your construction. You've got to want to have a good result. You need to have a priority that your client, the person you're building for,
Yeah.
is going to love their home, is
Right.
going to be happy with you as a builder and as a friend, and happy with
there's
their
no
house.
feeling in the world. I mean, there's plenty good feelings in the world, but one of the best feelings is walking into a client's house, into their kitchen, and seeing them living in it after everything you've gone through,
sure.
after the whole job. And you could be on a job for a period of a small amount of months to a period of a few years.
Mhm.
And it's an incredible feeling walking into someone's
Incredible.
house
And to be able to
seeing them
continue
living
doing
in it.
that over the years, because now
Sure.
you're living amongst
Right.
those people and they're your friends. So, I lived there and we did that, and then I did this behind us,
Yeah.
and I moved to there.
Right.
So the bottom line of that story
Yeah.
is that I didn't want to see all these tall buildings across the street
And
from
then
me. I
you
ended up
moved
living in it.
That's great. It's ironic. You've lived in like a lot of the neighborhoods of Efrat. How many we have 7 neighborhoods of Efrat,
Yeah,
and you've lived in how many of those?
in 5 of them.
Okay.
When we first came to Efrat in '88, we rented for a couple of months in the Rimon until our house in the Geffen was ready.
Right.
In the Geffen, from the Geffen we moved to the Dekel,
Wow.
and from the Dekel we moved to the Zayit. So actually we lived in 4.
Yeah.
But we did spend a lot of time in tents
I would
and
argue
sleeping
that
bags.
that Zayat and this Zayat are 2 different
There you
neighborhoods.
go. Okay, we could say that. And then we won't forget about all those nights that we slept in tents or in sleeping bags on Givata Dagan and
Right.
Givata Tamar.
Right.
There we go.
Wonderful. Beautiful.
And the Eitam.
Wow. Josh, I could sit here talking with you forever, man. This has been great. So informative. So much more I want to hear about. We're running out of time, and hopefully we'll get you on again. I don't know. Maybe a little bit of advice for people who want to move to this town. Maybe might want to buy something, a piece of land or a house. Some light at the end of the tunnel. What do you have to tell people?
Okay. First of all, come to Efrat. Come to Efrat. It's a great place. It's a great place. You're going to love it. Your kids are going to love it. So just come to Efrat. But come to Efrat in a smart way. You don't need to buy right away. Don't feel pressured to buy. If you're coming from another part of Israel, or if you're coming on Aliyah, you're coming from Chutz La'aretz.
Hold on. Josh, what's the best investment here from one ponytail to another?
All right.
Come on.
No, because I'm going to
Yeah.
say sometimes you
Yeah.
want to maybe get a feel of different neighborhoods first and stuff.
Right.
Before you make the decision
sure.
to buy something. And then look to buy in the place you feel comfortable. You might be living in one neighborhood, but you're starting to get a feel of other neighborhoods, and you're meeting people and all
Right.
that. But as far as what is it you want to know? Tell me.
Just show the people that there are good options here.
There are
that there's
great options
there's an
here.
ability to come here. Explain to them maybe the different types of options. I mean, you can move into, when you first come, you can move into like one of these apartment buildings, a smaller place, and like you were saying, look towards something else. Like, see if this neighborhood is good for you. If it works well, move on to something else. Are there properties? Are there lots still up for sale in Efrat? If
So
someone wanted to build,
Unfortunately, the day of the private
Private
lots to build on
Yeah.
are pretty much over for Efrat.
Right.
The trend in Efrat now, and it's the official line of the municipality, but it's common now to see it in other municipalities as well, is to get as many building units into as little space as possible. So we're talking
Right.
about tall buildings,
Mm-hmm.
9, 10, 12, 15-story buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, as far as I know, there are no reserves of land in any part of Efrat, except maybe a few on the Tamar, which I don't think are going to end up going to market for private plots of land. There may be a couple of lots out there secondhand. They're extremely expensive.
Right.
But if someone can afford it, sometimes it's cheaper to overpay on a piece of land and then build carefully and build slowly and not build a palace, but
Mhm.
build something modular that you can add on to. And you may end up spending less money than you would to buy some...
See, that's the kind of thing I
yeah,
wanted to hear.
that's something that
Mhm.
definitely someone should know, that even if a piece of land is 1.5 million or 1.8 or 2 million shekels...
You don't need to build a giant house right
Exactly, and you could always add on. So, and there are very few opportunities left in Efrat to get a private piece of land, and
So,
it's just
the one
second-hand pieces.
The one thing I'm getting from all this is come home and come home soon.
Yeah, definitely. Come home. There's a lot of reasons why they all got to come home. All right, and I mean, we won't go into it. We're short on time, but Jews have to come home, and Efrat is a great place to come home to in Eretz Yisrael. And in the end, you'll find something that's matim for you. And like I said, even if you don't find something to buy right away, you come rent, be here, get to know the place, get to know the people, and you're never going to want to leave. And you'll find your thing. You'll find your place.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining me here, man. It was a real pleasure on this Ponytail podcast. So if you like
You're
this
doing
podcast,
real good with that ponytail.
Yeah, it's pretty
yours
serious.
is growing a lot faster than mine.
Yeah,
I it's like,
I've been in it a few years.
I've been told that I'm starting to look like one of those old guys that are having this ponytail out of desperation while they still have some hair.
Sorry, you got a little bit more time for that. I love it. I love it, every moment of it. And look, there aren't many ponytailed men out there in this town. So the more of us, the better.
Let your freak flag fly, right?
I love it. If you like this podcast, please subscribe on all the places that you would. And thanks so much for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Hershey. It was great.